Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Sunday show. On the satellite loop, you can see a dissipating band of clouds moving across the northern southeast coast, and then some few clouds here down over the south. Otherwise, some areas of partly sunny skies across the panhandle there. Mostly clear from Yakutat westward into Prince William Sound to the Kenai Peninsula. Some clearing up over the Copper River Basin and the upper Tanana Valley. But a lot of cloudiness here from northern Cook Inlet through the Susitna Valley back into the northwest interior, all the way up to the North Slope, and the system moving across the northern Bering Sea right through here, pushing some rain this afternoon in toward the Seward Peninsula from St. Lawrence Island, and another storm system back here over the southwest, bringing some gale force winds and rain in with it as that batch of moisture slides eastward here over the central Aleutians. AKwx picked up about half an inch of rain today, with winds back at Shimei gusting to 35 miles per hour. And then this trough here, the stronger portion up to the north, a much weaker branch extending southward. A little bit of moisture possibly as far south as the Alaska Peninsula earlier today. Had some scattered showers here over Bristol Bay and the western Alaska Range up into the Susitna Valley earlier today, that tapering off this afternoon. Again, the clearing from the Kenai Peninsula here all across the North Gulf Coast. Lots of clouds and showers up over the northern interior areas, and then some clouds and areas of flurries, patchy fog, nothing that amounted to very much, mostly across from the eastern Arctic coast and across the North Slope areas. And for tonight, we'll see this low pressure area moves eastward, so rain and wind slide into the Pribilof Islands for tonight and extend southward to the eastern Aleutians. Rain approaching the Alaska Peninsula, and rain chances increase along with the wind there for Nunivak Island. Areas of rain up across Norton Sound and the southern Seward Peninsula, becoming a little more mixed with snow up to the north, and then the western mountains here looking for possible 1 to 2 inches of snow tonight associated with this frontal boundary here. And the moisture overrunning that western Arctic coast could see some light snow as well as the North Slope areas. Otherwise, high pressure over the eastern and southern interior. One center off the Gulf of over the Gulf of Alaska, another one up there over the Tanana Valley. And so light winds and partly cloudy skies, partly to mostly cloudy skies. So there will be some areas of low clouds and fog forming here, Kodiak Island up into the Cook Inlet area. There's a dense fog advisory out for the middle Tanana Valley, Fairbanks area there for later tonight. Fog increasing about 10 p.m. and that should last throughout the night, especially after midnight into most of the morning tomorrow, and then improve toward noon and after. Otherwise, just a few clouds there over the southeast coast, and again, dry conditions. And looking at the forecast for tomorrow, gale warnings out here for the southwest coast and small craft advisories up to St. Lawrence Island, with rain here from the Bering Strait southward along the coast, right along the coastline here, really not making much headway to the east through tomorrow, with rain and breezy conditions back along the Alaska Peninsula. Still looking at some scattered showers here over the Alaska and Aleutian Range area, and possibly Kodiak Island as well, but it should be partly sunny tomorrow here for south central Alaska. After the morning, low clouds and fog. Another nice day for Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, and not too bad, light winds and mostly fair conditions, partly sunny skies there for the Panhandle, as well as up into the interior, mostly cloudy, but should be generally dry, and most of the showers have ended. But again, the rain here back across the Seward Peninsula, Selawik Valley areas, mixed rain and snow up across the western mountains, but north of that frontal boundary, chance of snow for the western and central Arctic coast, and then a few flurries off to the east. And this area right here of moisture, that's going to lift northward as this front comes in from the east, so this will spread some rain across Kodiak Island late tomorrow night and into the early part of Tuesday. Then it'll taper off, but that whole batch of moisture will slip on up toward the Kenai Peninsula, bringing chance of rain even into Prince William Sound. That'll combine with the moisture from this weakening front working inland, the main low center pulling back to the northwest there, just south and southwest of St. Lawrence Island. That's where the winds will be the strongest, but areas of light rain from the Seward Peninsula across much of the southwest interior. Rainfall amounts don't look too excessively heavy, just again periods of light rain with this, and again improving over Kodiak Island, scattering out to a few isolated showers here over the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, as well as the Pribilof Islands. Not a lot of weather with this front up to the north there, very weak, but could be probably clouds and a few flurries there across the North Slope areas, but drying out here over the northwest, Noatak Valley and the Kivalina area down into Kotzebue Sound, not looking bad at all, with continued light winds here in over the eastern interior, and the Panhandle under high pressure. So another dry day, all of the Copper River Basin down along the southeast coast. Temperatures this afternoon, upper 40s to upper 50s. Juneau had 49 this afternoon. Annette came in with 59. Otherwise, there's a 50-degree reading at Yakutat, lower 50s for the North Gulf Coast, and mostly in the mid to upper 40s here for Cook Inlet and into the Susitna Valley. 48 degrees at Talkeetna this afternoon with a 46 at Northway, but just 38 degrees at Fairbanks, 41 at Tanana, up to the north, 34 in Anatuvik, and a 25-degree reading at Arctic Village. Fort Yukon, 39. Up along the Arctic coast, temperatures in the upper 20s to lower 30s there for the central and eastern areas. Warmer to the west with 40 degrees at Cape Lisburne and about that at Point Hope. Lower 40s here to near 50 over the northwest there. 42 at Kotzebue, Buckland up to 50. Lower 40s here along the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula with Nome at 41. Gamble 45 degrees. McGrath at 47, mostly in the mid to upper 40s here over a good portion of the southwest interior, but Macoriac pushed up to 50 degrees. And out over the Aleutians, lower 50s, pretty general there along the entire Aleutian chain, but on Alaska up to 55. Lower 50s again for the Alaska Peninsula here with a 48-degree reading at Port Heiden, Pilot Point 49, and 50 degrees at King Salmon, Dillingham 52. Lows tonight, mid-30s to mid-40s there for the southeast coast, mostly in the 30s here across southern Alaska, 20s Copper River Basin, upper 20s to mid-30s here over the Tanana Valley, cooler 20s from the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, and 30s to near 40 here for the Seward Peninsula, upper 40s along the southwest coast and the Pribilofs, with 50 the forecast low for Dutch Harbor. And for the highs tomorrow, not much range here with the wind and rain moving in, lower 50s for the Aleutians and upper 40s here over the southwest interior, mid 40s for the Seward Peninsula area, and the 40-degree isotherm extending all the way up to just about Point Lay there, and then back near or below freezing for the eastern Arctic coast, upper 30s and lower 40s over the eastern interior. Flying weather for tomorrow afternoon. Pretty good VFR expected here through much of the interior, up toward the Brooks Range, marginal to IFR. Western Arctic or central Arctic coast there, looking for some IFR from the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, along that frontal system and low pressure area all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula. And most of this IFR staying in the Gulf of Alaska, but edging northward to the coast on the east side there at Kodiak Island. VFR for the southeast coast. Anatuvik, marginal VFR tomorrow, as well as Adigan. And then Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal becoming VFR. Rainy, the same forecast. Windy, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Improving conditions for Isabel. Mentasta should be VFR the entire day. Tanita, marginal becoming VFR. Same forecast for Portage. Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels here from about 4,000 feet near Skagway to 10,000 feet down toward Klawock there across the Panhandle, kind of diverges out the 2,000 feet all the way up to Kivalina there, 6,000 feet to Nunivak Island, 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the Aleutians. And icing, again, with that front low pressure area coming up from the northeast there along that from the Bering Strait above about 6,000 feet here down across the Alaska Peninsula, and also a branch of possible icing across Kotzebue Sound and the northern Seward Peninsula in across the Kobuk and northern Koyukuk Valley areas to the Brooks Range. And there could be some icing also there for the western Arctic coast and central North Slope areas. Upper level wind flow chart showing again strong jet, the stronger branch taking off to the southeast here, and a weaker branch coming up 35 knots, picking up to about 50 knots, mostly westerly flow through the central interior. And at 9,000 feet, we have that low coming up southwest of St. Lawrence Island. Strong winds at this elevation, 35 to 50 knots from the Alaska Peninsula, right up across the Yukon Delta. Northwest behind the front, 25 to 35 knot winds out in that area, diminishing back to the west. Southerlies 15 to 25 there along the Alaska Range, but much lighter conditions here over the southeast interior. Light winds down across the southeast coast. 3,000 foot winds, again, pretty good flow here, 50 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, 40 knots up along the southwest coast, and about 35 there for St. Lawrence Island. Northwesterlies 25 to 30 knots following in behind. Light winds under high pressure here along the southeast coast, much of the central and eastern interior, but easterlies, east-southeasterlies about 30 knots on the west central Arctic coast. Turbulence-wise, look for some light to isolated moderate chop up in this area. Moderate chop, St. Lawrence Island down along the southwest coast to the Alaska Peninsula, and then another area of moderate turbulence expected here. Nikolsky back up to the northwest there in those strong northwest winds. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Northeast winds to 65.
When lifting loads, the weight of the load is centered at the top of the boom, significantly raising the center of gravity. This can act like a large lever and result in capsizing. Do not bring loads fully on deck unless you know that they can be safely landed and your equipment can handle the load.
In my opinion, the primary cause of the instability in this case was that we were fishing for herring and prepared to fish and catch herring, but we weren't equipped the way we should have been. What happened after the set was made and there was a large bag or net full of fish alongside the boat and ready to start transferring the herring into the hold of the boat, the method used was braille. And the size of this set and the time duration of that operation led to herring dying in the net, adding weight to the bottom of the net. The bag of net is right alongside the boat, and that caused increasing weight at the time caused the boat to roll.
Keep the load as close to the center line of the vessel as possible, and keep the lifted load from swinging. Be conservative when lifting loads in rough seas or when the vessel's stability has been compromised, and get product and gear low as soon as possible. Loads should always be secure.
We've had that thing on the side of the boat before, but this felt a little more severe, especially when I know that the bow of the skiff was still centered. It was just the stern that was on the corner. There was a possibility we had some things in the hatch. I know we had a net, possibly a few 100 pounds of something down there had tumbled over to the port or the starboard side also. And now it's there. Of course it's crappy out. We don't want to pull the tarp and the hatch off, of which exposing an open hole in big weather to go down and see if there's something that needs moving. It was dangerous out there without, I mean, I was in a float suit and all, but it was dangerous to do all this stuff. I ended up coming in telling the guys I can't move it. There was a decision that could have been made. We could have gotten rid of it, shuttled it, get it off the deck. Hindsight now, yeah, get rid of it. It wasn't my $40,000 skiff to be launching. It was the captain's.
A load that shifts rapidly changes the center of gravity. At sea, power blocks, skiffs, fishing gear, booms, and rigging should be kept secure at all times. Secure gear before you think you need to. Over time, vessels change equipment and get altered for other fisheries. Whenever making major changes, consult with a naval architect to ensure that you are not making changes your vessel was not designed to handle. Weight creep can also develop gradually with small additions over time. It's a good idea to keep a log of the additions you make over time. The log should be reviewed periodically by a naval architect to reassess stability. And every 6 to 12 months, get rid of extra gear or equipment no longer needed. Beware of altering vessels for fisheries they were not designed for without consulting a naval architect.
Once they reach this magical 2% weight change, and it doesn't have to be an even exchange, it's just 2% overall weight change of the vessel, they really should have their stability reevaluated.
Fishing gear can get hung up on the bottom and cause the vessel to capsize.
Will you take precautions for a hanging up situation?
Keep knives handy to cut away gear. And when appropriate, use rigging that will break away before a capsize. Try to stay clear of large kelp patches which can catch stabilizers or birds and cause a vessel to heel and downflood. Another reason to keep doors and hatches secure. For vessels that cannot use breakaway gear, have a means to rapidly release winch brakes or clutches, or be able to cut cables.
You would have winches where you could control the tension, and above a certain level, the winches would automatically release cable and allow the boat to move.
The seamanship of the helmsman is of vital importance in heavy weather. Especially if stability is being compromised, make sure your most experienced person is at the helm. A good helmsman can anticipate and respond to seas more effectively than an autopilot. In heavy seas, slow down to reduce damage to windows and reduce icing if present. Beware of following seas. They may be more comfortable, but they are more challenging for stability. Rough following seas can result in broaching and capsizing and should concern anyone at the helm. Quartering seas are even more hazardous.
Trying to keep our stern into the swells was causing us to get a little more and more off course. And I realized that we were going to need to drive, in order to stay the course, we were going to have to drive a little more starboard, which was going to present us a little more broadside to the weather, which I knew was dangerous.
If seas are extreme, keep the vessel's bow into or quartering into the seas to minimize water on deck and vessel motion. The use of a sea anchor is an excellent way to keep the bow into seas if you lose propulsion or steering. Secure doors and hatches to prevent flooding. Anticipate worsening weather and make efforts to improve stability before weather strikes.
There's quite a few things that I learned at that time. First and foremost, if it says storm warning, stay at port, don't go. It's not worth it.
Secure gear in anticipation of heavy seas. Avoid pumping from full tanks to empty tanks, which will increase free surface effect, or moving loads to correct a list without knowing the cause. This has resulted in many capsizings. Put your most experienced helmsman on the wheel in heavy weather. When acquiring a new vessel, ask to have your stability guidelines explained by a naval architect.
Basically the same trim in the boat that you started out with.
Be sure to review these guidelines, and when entering a new fishery or substantially modifying your vessel, Have your guidelines updated. Capsizing is one of the consequences of poor operations that can affect stability. The 9 areas of operational stability include: always load your vessel within the stability guidelines of your vessel. Avoid having loose fluids or loose fish on your vessel that can quickly change your center of gravity. Keep water out of your vessel by the use of properly maintained and closed watertight doors, hatches, and bulkheads. Avoid weather that can produce icing conditions, and when you can't, work at preventing icing from building up. When lifting a load, keep it as close to the center line as possible and keep it from swinging. Make sure that loads cannot shift with strong bin boards and well-secured gear. Log the additional weight of gear and alterations and consult with naval architects about their effects on stability. In case gear hangs up, be sure to have a way to quickly cut gear free or release winches. Heavy seas present an increasingly dynamic challenge to your vessel's stability. Finally, even a vessel with updated stability guidance will only be as safe as how it is operated by the crew. Ensure that all crew members understand these procedures and follow them. The lives of the crew and the welfare of their families depend on it.
It's a constant dynamic force with stability. Their center of gravity is constantly changing as they add fish, burn fuel, use water, and the weights are shifting fore and aft. They have constant changes in the way the vessel rides.
Trying to keep a safe boat, it should be pretty easy if you've been on the water a while, but if you get careless and you just don't think about some things. It is serious though when you get out there to see how bad Mother Nature wants to stir the pot. You better hope that you're at the top of your game with your safety and how your vessel operates.
Welcome back. Well, northeast at about 10 here for the north coast and northwesterlies 10 to 15 knots on the south coast. Inside waters, winds range from northerlies at 25 for northern Lynn Canal to 15 knots here for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. And then for Tuesday, pretty light winds out here along the coast, mostly from an easterly direction or east-southeast direction, but only 10 knots, all those locations. North winds at about 20 there for northern Lynn Canal, north 15 for Stevens Passage, and light winds for the southern inner channels. For the Prince William Sound and North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots tomorrow, northeasterlies 10 to 15 for Cook Inlet, and pretty light east-northeasterlies, Kodiak Island at about 15 knots. And for the Barrens, southeast at about 10, becoming easterly in across Kamishak Bay. And then those increase, got gale warnings out for the Barren Islands or southeast winds at 35 knots, easterlies at 30 knots there for Kamishak Bay, also small craft advisories for Kodiak Island, and easterlies at about 10 knots there for Prince William Sound. Excuse me, the North Gulf Coast, easterly winds at 20. And for Bristol Bay, southeast 25 knots. The Alaska Peninsula, south to southeast 30 knot winds, small craft advisories there with 9 to 10 foot seas, lighter up toward Kodiak Island. And then the outlook for Tuesday, westerlies at 25 knots here for the waters north of the Seward Peninsula, or the Kenai, or the Alaska Peninsula, northwest 20 on the south side, and Bristol Bay, southwest 20 knots with 6 foot seas. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, west to southwest winds 30 to 35 knots there in that area. Westerlies at about 30 knots for the central Aleutians, and then 20 knot winds all the way out to Shemya. And looking ahead to Tuesday, small craft advisories here, most areas, but not all. All westerly winds 20 to 25 knots across the central Aleutians all the way to Unalaska, with seas running 8 to 11 feet. And for the southwest coast, gales tomorrow, that front approaching, but behind the front, pretty brisk westerlies there for the Pribilofs, northwest 20 for the waters near and to the west of St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, southeast 30 knots with 7-foot seas. And then on Tuesday, those winds come down a little bit, become southwesterly at 30 knots for the southwest coast. Easterly gales there for St. Lawrence Island, and westerly gales here for the northern Bering Sea, 25-knot winds for the Pribilofs. And up along the Arctic coast, easterlies 15 to 20 knots here in the east side, but significantly stronger here for the central and western coast. Small craft advisories, 30 knots out of the east, 6 to 7-foot seas. Southerlies, 20 to 25 knots there from Kotzebue Sound to the north. And then those become easterly here, 25 to 30 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort. And then we've got small craft advisories here for much of the Arctic coast for easterly winds, 25 to 30 knots, strongest on the west side, and then over toward Demarcation Point. Winds still easterly, but diminishing to about 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And for tonight, snow up here over the northwest. Could see 1 to 2 inches there, but rain down across the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island. This storm system spreads wind and rain into the Pribilof Islands, eastern Aleutians, and some rain and wind increase also later tonight for the Alaska Peninsula. But high pressure, fair conditions, dense fog advisory out for the mid-Tanana Valley area. Fair here across the southeast coast. And then for tomorrow, rain advances to the southwest coast here from about Cape Newenham up to St. Lawrence Island. Pretty wet conditions, and again, gale force winds out along the coast as well, with rain for the Alaska Peninsula, scattering out the showers back behind the front. Otherwise fair, partly sunny after the morning, low clouds and fog over the southeast interior, and rain for the southwest coast up to the Seward Peninsula. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.